Good morning. We are going to get started. Thank you for finding a seat. In case someone has come into the sanctuary this morning for our 9:40 worship service, as a visitor, let me just mention this is a business session in the life of Germantown United Methodist Church. You are welcome as a visitor to participate in this presentation. However, anything on which there's a vote could only be done by the members of Germantown United Methodist Church. So if you're a visitor and you think you're coming into the 9:40 service, we welcome you to stay as long as you understand the business portion of this gathering. It's my privilege to introduce our district superintendent, Dr. Tim Carpenter. He's already brought us a glorious message this morning. Those of you who attend the 11 o'clock service will be correspondingly blessed. He will lead us in today's important session. I do want to begin by introducing the key leadership of Germantown United Methodist Church. We're going to call you by committee. I simply want you to stand as a group and quickly be seated. First of all, the members of the church board, would you stand? All members of the church board. Some of you don't know who you are. Thank you. God bless you. Members of the pastor's council, would you stand? Thank you. Members of the finance committee, would you stand? Thank you. Members of our trustees committee, would you stand? Thank you. Members of the staff parish relations committee, would you stand? And members of our endowment committee, would you stand? God bless each of you and thank you. Brad, would you come lead us in prayer? And also with you.
Good morning. I will call this church conference to order and would like to start by calling upon Henry Evans, who is going to explain the process and what we are going to be discussing this morning. Henry?
Say in Verizon, can you hear me now? I serve as chairman of your church board, and we are delighted that so many of you came this morning to hear this very important presentation. You know from what's been said in worship over the last few weeks that we're here today to share information with you about the long-term maintenance needs facing our church. We also want to take just a moment this morning to explain to you how we happen to be at this position and what your continuing role will be as we address alternative solutions. A few weeks ago, Peggy Warner, who serves as your chair of the trustees committee, spoke to you in church and told you about a problem we were having across the street at OLEC. Peggy told you that the air conditioning systems in that building had failed, and that to purchase a new system would cost us roughly $72,000. And she asked for your help. And you responded generously. Thanks to your contributions, a larger than expected insurance payment, and a contribution by the trustees from their church budget, we were able to meet that $72,000 goal, and that system has now been purchased and installed, and OLEC is cool again. However, the OLEC failure of the air conditioning system is just the tip of the long-term maintenance iceberg that's facing our church. As our facilities continue the aging process, we're going to encounter those failures and needs for replacement. with increasing regularity, and the cost of those replacements will far exceed the $72,000 challenge we met this summer. Your trustee and your finance committees began work a year ago to determine the long-term needs of our church and to begin to estimate the cost of meeting those needs. We will tell you folks that as we look at the challenge that's ahead of us, we've got to come up with a method of meeting those needs and at the same time finding a way to pay for them without having to constantly come back to the congregation with our hat in our hand saying, please help to get us over this immediate hurdle. We have another problem, and that is our church budget has very little flexibility. If we are going to continue to fund the missions and ministries and programs of this church, we simply do not have the funds available to begin to put additional monies into the trustees' budget to meet these long-term needs. So our first step was to identify what these needs may be. And the second step, which is perhaps the most important of all, is how we're going to pay for them over the long term. Today's meeting, then, is simply a matter of information for you. But at the same time, before we leave here this morning, we're going to ask that you affirm the direction in which your lay leadership team is moving to address and ultimately to solve this problem. Your staff and your lay team is committed to developing a plan to not only meet these needs, but at the same time to create a funding mechanism from which we will pay for them. During these next several weeks, we will be trying to identify funding options. And once those options are determined, we will submit them to the church board for consideration and approval. And once the church board has approved those, we will be coming back to you as a congregation to ask for your affirmation and approval before the end of this year. We know this morning you're going to have questions. And so following John Gregory's presentation in the next few minutes, we'll have an opportunity for you to ask those questions. John is going to discuss that list with you of all of these maintenance needs that now projects to take us through the next 10 years. So as you listen to that presentation from John, remember that without this campus, without these facilities, few if any of us would be able to participate in the various missions that we treasure so dearly and support so faithfully. Brad, in his Tidings article, summed it up very well. That if we're to participate in service there, we have to be able to gather as a congregation here. So please, help us to focus on the protection and enhancement of our facilities as they play a vital role for us as we continue on our journey to becoming the church God would have us to be. John Gregory, our lay leader. John?
Thanks. Good morning. While the one-page data summaries are being distributed, I would like to again thank Jenny, Peggy, and Brad for all their effort in developing this initial estimate of our capital and major maintenance plan. I would also like to... Can you hear me? Sorry. Okay? All right. I've been wired before, so here we go. Let me start over. While the one-page data summary is being distributed, I would like to again thank Jenny, Peggy, and Brad for all their effort in developing this initial estimate of our capital and major maintenance plan. I would also like to introduce Brooke Critchfield, who is our new campus manager, who as a part of his responsibilities will be taking the lead, working with Jenny, Peggy, and others to further develop and refine this data. Now, before we get into the numbers, and I know you want to look, but before we start looking at the numbers, let me take a minute to describe the process that the group used to develop this initial information. First was to inspect and record the condition of the buildings, equipment, and grounds across our campus, and review equipment and maintenance history files. Then to project the life remaining in our equipment, carpeting, roofing, parking lot, and the various elements and assets of our facilities, and when replacement or major maintenance will be required. Then replacement and major maintenance costs were estimated and summed up by year over this 10-year period. Historical costs, rough estimates, discussions with our equipment service providers, and some quotes were used to estimate cost. Going forward, the objective is to get the majority of the work quoted to improve the quality of this cost data. The work so far has resulted in a spreadsheet with more than 2,000 pieces of data, Jenny, and is very much a work in progress. The summary review today is a rough estimate, which will be improved and refined over the next few months. But again, our purpose today is to review where we are and to get your support and approval to continue to develop and refine the plan, including the options for funding. So let's review the numbers, and once we get through the numbers, we'll have time for some questions. So focus on your one-page sheet. The study looked at the entire campus, our 14 acres, and included the 7 buildings across the campus with equipment and grounds. As I said, the period that we're looking out over is 10 years, so it's not a short-term but a longer-term look. And the current estimate of these costs for equipment replacement and major maintenance is in the $2.5 to $3 million range. Now below, we looked at those dollars from two perspectives. The first by element, and the second by building. The numbers you see summed are the total over that 10-year period of those numbers. Now, as you might guess, because of our current position, over that 10-year period, those dollars are front-end loaded. By that, I mean about 50% of them are forecast over the first 3 years, about 30% over the next 3 years, and 20% over the last 4 years. Now let's start with our look by element, and what I would like for you to do is to slip down to the next to last item, vehicles. I think by talking about this item, you'll get a clearer view of what's included in the numbers. We have 2 church vans, 12 and 15 passenger vans, and when we go to look at those vans and inspect them, we find that they're 15 plus years old. One of them has greater than 180,000 miles, and the second greater than 140,000 miles. The judgment was we need to replace those vans. Well, what's the out-of-pocket cost to do that? The estimate is about $35,000 per van, or $70,000. So then we said, okay, what is the expected useful life of those vans? Well, our experience says they're good for 15 years. Well, probably 15 years from now, they won't be $35,000. The guess would be about 50. So we're looking 15 years out, seeing the need for $100,000 to replace those vans when they're at the end of their useful life. So if it's $100,000 in 15 years, that represents about $7,000 a year that we need to be reserving to cover the cost of that investment when it occurs. So when we look at vehicles and that $135,000, that includes $70,000 for current replacement and 9 years of basically depreciation costs that would be reserved for that future replacement of the vans. That is the process that is reflected in all of the numbers. So let's go back up to the top and start with roofing. $730,000 over a 10-year period. We have 7 buildings. We have flat roofs. We have pitch shingle roofs, and we have hybrids of the two. Typically, we look at about a 20-year life of these buildings, and we're in various stages of the life of the various roofs that we have. The next item is our HVAC systems. There are 50-plus pieces of heating, ventilating, and air cooling across our campus. They're different sizes, they're different designs, they include chillers and condensers and air handlers and the like. And they have a range of life in the 15 to 30-year period, depending on the piece of equipment we're talking about. Parking lots. We have east, main, and west lots. Resurfacing, relining, and in some cases, repair because of tree rooting requiring tree removal is reflected in the cost shown there. Across our campus, we have carpet, we have tile, and we have wood flooring. In the furniture and fixtures category, that includes tables, chairs, stoves, refrigerators, freezers in our kitchens, and the like. We've spoken about the vehicles. And in the computers software area, last year we replaced our computers, 19 of them, $40,000. We would project a typical life of about 5 years in our computers. So as we look out over this 10-year period, we'll be looking at 2 more replacements of the computers that we use here in the church. So when you sum those expenditures up, you arrive at a range $2.5 to $3 million. Again, this is a rough estimate, but this is where we are and should put us in the ballpark of our thinking. Now slip down to the second part of the page and you'll see the same dollars, but spread over our buildings. The main building, which you would expect is the majority of our cost, just under $2 million. The top 5, representing about 70% of those costs, are roof, HVAC, flooring, paint, and windows. Those are the items that are high dollar that we see over this 10-year period will need to be dealt with. At the OLEC, the big 3 over there are roof, parking lot, and floor. In the cottage and the adult education building on the east side of our campus, those dollars are primarily in repair and upgrade, but they each also include 1/2 of the parking lot cost on that side, on the east side. In the Prescott House, the McKendree building, and the counseling center, those dollars are general repair and upgrade, and in the case of the Prescott House, includes 1 roof replacement that's projected over this 10-year period. So again, $2.5 to $3 million are projected. Now before we get into questions, I'd like to take just a minute to thank many of you who are here today, and I'm sure some who are not here, for your volunteer efforts over the last year plus. We've had several work days and several work projects. The latest was this last 2 weeks of some major tree trimming activities that have gone on, and if you look, I'm sure you'll see the results of that. Earlier this year, we had a work day which focused on our outside of our grounds that included care of flower beds from weeding and remulching and pruning and power washing the portico areas and working a half day over on the McVeigh side of the house. Earlier, we had a crew who erected walls, installed ovens, and kitchen cabinetry in the cottage to give us the capability to participate in the Room and Inn ministry for the homeless. We also, at the adult education building just across the lot there, had a group of people who replaced the fence that was falling down and repaired some windows that were rotting. We had a group of people join Jose and his staff at the OLEC to install an exercise room that was needed, that involved wall work and flooring work. I mention these things just to show that a lot is being done to take pressure off of our budget from folks with skills and big hearts in the congregation. It's estimated that greater than $20,000 of labor and greater than $2,000 in material and equipment rental costs have been offset by that volunteering effort. So thank you for that. I'd also like to recognize Jose and his couple of guys' staff for the work that they do. In addition to their routine jobs and keeping the routine maintenance and the facilities working, they bring some unique skills in carpentry, masonry, and have applied those skills for small project work that might otherwise have had to be contracted at a much higher cost. I'd also like to recognize Brad, who has looked over our vendor contracts, renegotiated a number of those, and beginning next year, we expect to see savings more than $2,000 a month. So there's some good stewardship things that are going on, and I want to thank those of you that are involved for stepping up to that. Tim, I really appreciate the message that you brought us this morning, and the ones that were not here at early service will see it later. But it's a message of faith. And what I suggest to you is that we need to step out in faith and be good stewards of these great facilities that we've been blessed with. So now what I would like to do is entertain questions, and I would ask you, if you will, raise your hand if you have a question, hold it till we get a microphone to you, and then all of us can hear what your question is. So the floor is open for any questions you might have. There's one in the, is that Mike?
John, right here. What is the current use of the McKendree House, and what are the plans down the road? The use of the McKendree District House?
The McHenry House is, we're being sought for new uses of that house since the district people are moving out of it, and I believe it's a pretty done deal, isn't it, Brad, or not? On the McHenry House, who's going in there?
It is no longer a done deal as things are not in real estate, but we will be finding appropriate ministry use that will again generate funds to support.
Okay, I stand corrected. I thought we had a tenant, but it looks like that one fell apart. But I think the objective, and I just believe we'll be successful, would be to find new tenants who help support that facility over there. There was someone else. Ron.
So, John,
Okay. Go ahead, Ron.
appreciate your excellent description. The description of the vehicles made it clear how you went about this study, and I'm sure everybody understands how he came up with the numbers. And appreciate we're going forward, we're going to refine them. My question is, where does the choices part of it come in? For instance, does the McVeigh building, do we keep that? Do we need it? Can we do something besides have the adult education building? Are there other spaces? Where's the choices part of this, whether we spend this money or somewhere else?
Good questions, Ron, and I think that's the part of the refinement process that we're going to be involved in over the next few months. This is, as I say, this is a very rough estimate, a first start, and I think making those judgments, and of course, as we go, when we get our plan, as we go forward living that plan, each time we come to a crossroads, there will be judgments that have to be made about that. Okay? Mike, sorry to keep you standing.
No problem. John, what's our current level of debt?
I'm sorry?
How much do we owe?
Is it $2 million? Just over two.
And does that have a balloon, or is that being amortized monthly?
I mean, we got some bad folks. Mike, there is a balloon, and it's 9 years out.
Other questions? One back here.
John, I would encourage you to as you do your deliberations and think about funding this for the next 10 years, to remember that there's a 10-year period that comes beyond that, and there's a 10-year period that comes beyond that you guys need to think of perpetual funding, because we will have perpetual maintenance.
Good point. Thanks, Jim. Question right here.
I'm on. This will be an evolving process. We won't just start and stop with this 10-year period. There's going to have to be a constant updating, probably on an annual or at least a biannual basis, to keep current with what our needs are in the future.
John, what do you see as our immediate need, for instance, over the next 12 months? Or have you gotten that far yet?
Well, we really haven't got specifically on that, Ed, but I think from what I understand of the numbers and looking at them, when it comes to the critical things, you've got to spend the money, such as the chiller at OLEC. We've got several more pieces of our heating and ventilating and air system that are basically at or soon will be at their expected useful life. So there are some critical additional needs in that area. Many of these, as you can guess, you can make decisions about them. Some of them you don't have much time to make a decision on.
Jill and I are recent members of the church. In looking through the 2015 Community Foundation book this week, as a matter of fact, I found Christ United Methodist Church Endowment Fund. Is this restricted money, and is it meaningful?
The endowment fund?
Yes.
Is Frank? Where's Frank?
This seems to be a
there's-
good manner to take care of continuing expenses.
Frank, you want to speak to that? Frank chairs our endowment fund and can more correctly answer you on that.
Yeah, our endowment fund currently stands at approximately $1,250,000. Those funds are set aside to provide income in perpetuity and specifically for items that are not included in the church's budget. One of the items that we can use the funds for is our properties, and in the past we have used those funds from time to time to assist the trustees with the dollars they did not have access to.
Thank you.
Okay. Along with that, our endowment provides a spending policy, and the purpose of our spending policy and our investment policy is to make sure that these endowment funds do last in perpetuity to the extent that we can. So our committee works with a spending policy of allowing us to use up to 5% of a rolling 3-year average for these types of expenditures in mission work and projects. For the 2016 year, that gives the committee approximately $63,000 to be used for unbudgeted items. Yeah, the basic 5 areas that we can use to spend these endowment funds on includes facilities and properties, it includes mission work, it includes adult ministries, and it includes youth, as well as a general category that gives the committee a little broader opportunity to use these funds.
Thanks, Fred. Other question? Did you have a question? Let's get a microphone. Tina?
Under grounds and maintenance, buildings and grounds, does it include the irrigation system?
Irrigation system?
Is that included?
Jenny, yes, it is included. Sorry? Yes,
Who else?
Hello. Back here. I have a question. What is the current budget for major maintenance replacement or capital outlay replacement?
We have right now, as a part of the trustee budget, about $180,000 budgeted for maintenance, but that does not include major equipment replacement or major maintenance type work. That's $180,000, and through July, it's spent up at about, I think about 51 or 2% has been spent.
As to the budgeting, this 2.5 million to 300 to 3 million for the next 10 years, breaking that down and then looking into the future after that.
This 2.5 to 3 million rough estimate covers 10 years out.
Yes.
And then, as been mentioned, we will need to look at that as a very much a live event. And as we talked about vehicles being having a 15-year life, we need to expand beyond that, and intentions are to do that.
To do all of this and put it in specific monthly terms, if you can, how much would we be looking at each month to add to this, our budget that we know that we'll need to come up with each month?
Well, if we looked at the total, what I said earlier is that about half of these monies are needed in the first 3 years of the period because we're behind. The next 3 years represents 30% of those monies, and then the last 4 years represents 20%. So it varies by month over those years, if you will.
But half of it will be needed in the first
3 years.
3 years.
That's the current projection.
Okay, thank you.
That's the current. But again, I want to keep saying that this is our initial rough estimate at these things, and we'll be working to refine, get most of the things quoted, and get a better picture of how this looks over the next few months. But we think we're in the ballpark.
This appears to be a static picture of a certain number of facilities for the next 10 years. Are there any plans for expansion of the current facilities or acquisitions?
Someone else may want to answer that. All I know is a plan that anytime there's an opportunity for a facility that touches us, we look at that. But I can't give you a specific, we're going after that plan or we're going to expand this building on a given time frame. For example, we looked at the potential of the restaurant north of us, but it wasn't available. There'd already been a use defined for that and a party interested in it. So I think the general posture of the church has been for some time is when there's an opportunity, we need to evaluate it because we're pretty much locked with what we have.
John, would you remind me, others may remember this, what our current annual budget is?
Go ahead, sorry.
And when you talk about presenting the plan, this will include the options with priority recommendations, as well as how we're going to raise that additional money, or your recommendations
The first thing, Shirley, the budget is $3.3 million, and I would think that as we refine and develop the plan, we'll prioritize things because, you don't know that they're going to exactly their own plan, and when they happen, you may not be prepared to respond to all of the things that happen. So there will be priority given to those things. But that's part of this refinement that I keep mentioning. Other questions?
I have one. As far as replacement asset value, do we have a feel for what the replacement cost would be for the buildings? Excuse me. And what percent of replacement asset value are we looking at with the $2.5 to $3 million?
Well, there's no 100% replacement of buildings in the plan, but we do have the major elements of equipment replacement and major maintenance as we delineated with roofing, flooring, heating and ventilating, and the like. But in this plan, there are no plans to basically replace a building or structure.
But as far as a rule of thumb for the maintenance cost for facilities, what % of replacement value might this represent? 5%, 2.5%, 2%?
I'm not sure I understand the question yet. Are you talking about replacing the building?
No. I'm talking about the cost of maintenance as a % of replacement value. It's used throughout industry for determining and benchmarking maintenance costs, just as a checkpoint, Charlie, if you will.
Thank you. At this point, what we've been doing is gathering the amount of money needful to replace these capital assets, comparing that to the value of our property, if that's what you're asking.
Well,
that should be a simple math.
The value of the buildings, not the land itself.
Yes, what we would have to do, I would assume, is go to our insurance coverage for that, their estimation of
that would probably be a good starting point. Yes.
Right. That would be math.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Good point.
Could I just offer one thing? There have been a couple questions about what immediate needs. We think probably within a year we'll probably need around $500,000. But it's so, this is why this is a rough estimate. Right now we have between 10 and 15 air conditioning units that are already past when we thought they would go out. They're still working, but tomorrow, one could go. So that's why this is so rough, and it's impossible to say this year we're going to spend $500,000 or $300,000. We don't know, but we know eventually in 10 years they're all gone. It's just like the OLEC was supposed to last 20, it lasted 27. So hopefully, all of them will be like that, but we really can't say. Does that help at all? We just really don't. We don't know. We just know that in 10 years it's going to be. And also this money, like when John explained about the vehicles, that 135 obviously is more than we would need to replace them if they last 15 years. The 135 includes money toward the next grouping of years. Do you see what I'm saying? We're going really beyond 10 with this, if that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone in the balcony? Okay, very much thank you for your attention this morning and your input and involvement. And I would say as we go forward on this, if you have any ideas about funding, I'm sure Jenny and the Finance Committee would just be more than happy to hear from you. And also from a facilities point of view, Peggy, Brooke, and the trustee folks would be glad to hear. Now, as church governors, I need to put this in the form of a motion. If you would like to read along with me, you can flip over on the back of the summary data sheet. The members of GUMC assembled this day direct that the GUMC Board of Trustees and Finance Committee, along with such other church members and staff as they deem needed, continue to research and refine expected replacement costs for GUMC capital assets as may be needed over the next 10 years. The assets involved shall include, but not be limited to, such items as HVAC, roofs, parking lots, flooring, etc. We anticipate that as information is gathered, it shall be made available at all church board, trustee, and finance committee meetings for the remainder of 2016. Any suggested actions will be referred to a special church conference to be held before the end of this year. Yeah?
This motion is now before you. As the motion has been read, it is before you. Are there any specific questions about the motion that has been read now? There is one question concerning the wording of the motion.
Is there a way to remove the reference to 10 years and make it in perpetuity?
Not willing at this point. Do you want to speak to that, Brad?
No. I hear what you're saying. We agree. We are on the same wavelength. The need, the desire, what the church will do, because we all believe in each other, is create a funding in perpetuity. But what we need at this point is a reasonable timeline that we can hold on to and project in a rolling 10-year pattern, knowing that 5 years from now we're going to have 10 years out, which makes it in 15, and 15 years out we'll be looking at 25 years. Is that okay? Thank you.
I'm ready to call for a vote then. If you would approve this motion as it is before you, would you raise a hand? Any opposed? Likewise? The motion carries. I want to give my thanks to all of you for gathering for this important conference and this time together. I thank you for the way in which you've had this discussion and all of the work that's been done to lay the groundwork for this, and also for the continuing discussions that I know is going to happen. And I thank you all once again for this. As Methodists, one of the things the early Methodists were known for was singing hymns, and we've got a little bit of time, and I'm going to ask us to turn to page 128 in your hymnal. What are we doing? We're going to sing a hymn. And we could do it without accompaniment. As my young son used to say when he was little, we can do it Acapulco. So, but would you stand and let's sing the first and the last stanzas of this song as a celebration. Receive this word of benediction. Go now in peace, and may the peace of Christ, which passes all understanding, rest and abide with you now and forevermore. Amen.